Welcome to another episode of the Rich Sony podcast. Today we got Roe O'Brien on the episode. How's it going, Ro?
It's going good. How you doing, Rich?
I'm doing good. Feeling pretty good. It's a little later than we've been chit-chatting for like an hour offline sound checking, but we're rolling now, you know? I'm feeling good.
Awesome.
So let's just open it right up. I think it'd be fun to do that. I was just actually listening to the song you had sent me today, your new one. You gave me a sneak peek, which that was, before we even get into that was really cool. I loved that sheet you had sent. It's like a one sheet thing.
Yeah.
What do you call that?
I feel like it's like press release, EPK, or electronic press kit is what EPK stands for those who might not know that acronym. I feel like it's kind of like, I don't know, it's like synonymous with both terms. But anyway, yeah, just like a little one sheet. It's something I've been trying to do as an artist, like to try to like do press and make it organized for like people. Be like, hey, I have this new song coming out. So. Yeah,
I love that. We had been talking about this earlier, right? About things carrying over from work and bleeding over. And one of my first jobs I had was I worked at this place called The Orchard, which is like a music distribution place.
Yes, I'm familiar.
I did my internship there in college, and we would create one sheets and send. This was in the physical days, so I was on the physical side, and we would like create the one sheets and pack them up into CD samplers and like send them out to record stores.
Oh my goodness.
And like I have that skill, but I have never made a one sheet for myself.
This was also my first attempt, and also too for the listeners. So I have a song coming out on July 12th called Capture the Flag, and this is what we're talking about depending when this gets released. But that's fascinating. This was my first time doing it because I think as an artist, speaking for myself, but I think for others as well, doing the songwriting, playing the gigs, recording the music, it's so much energy. The last thing you want to do is be like, and now I'm going to convince the world who I am and why this is like worthy to listen to, and kind of write it down. And I think a lot of folks don't do it. And I honestly had never done it. And, writing some sort of press one sheet. And I was like reading a couple articles about why it's important to do it. And I was like, dang, like it is important to do because it's like you're basically advocating for yourself if you write that up. And I think when you're looking for any sort of press opportunity, whether that's, written or podcasting or whatever, it kind of just gives that person an idea of like, okay, who you are, what the media is it an album, is it a single, what it's about, who worked on it. It's sometimes nice to just have that all in one place so people can like read that, digest, and walk away. It like sets you up for success to give that to somebody else. It doesn't always mean that somebody's gonna want to do anything with it, and that's fine, and that's part of the process. It's part of life, not everybody's gonna, some people will read it and be like, I don't care, and that's fine. But for those who do, I think it, it sets them up in a good position to have a good idea about like what you're all about. So
100%. Yeah, no. And I think first of all, it's also a total pro move. Like when I got that, I'm like, this is awesome. This is pro, but I did notice that in my head too. I was like, it's really cool that you're pausing for a minute and waiting to release this for a couple months, because that's also like you're doing that. I feel like I'm getting something like early, but to do that you can't just like jump the gun and put something out.
And that is also like kind of like a new feeling experience, because I think the thing is too, it's like once the song or the record is done, what do you want to do? You want to share with everybody immediately because you're like, oh my God, I just like work so hard. Like just live, breathe, exist in the world, And it's been a work in progress, or just on like self-discipline, I guess, because especially with this song too, this song was written in August of 2021. It was recorded in July or August of 2022, but it wasn't like mixed until like this past fall. And
Yeah.
when it was finally done, I think it was done before Thanksgiving. So it was like fully done before Thanksgiving of 2023. It just the way this one-off happened, it just took a while to complete. And it's like, yes, my instinct is like, okay, great, it's done. I can't wait for everybody to hear it. And I'm like, but maybe if I make this sheet and like maybe ask people to write about it or talk about it a little bit, it can, pay in dividends, or you know what it is? I think to be a DIY artist, it's like a grand experiment. And I think for me as a DIY artist, it's like, I try to remember I have to gamify it sometimes. And this is like part of the game. And it might be annoying and it might be aggravating at times, but it's like, but maybe if we do these things, more good things and opportunity can happen, So it's me just trying to play the game, and also to remember it's like, oh yeah, this is like supposed to be fun. This is like supposed to be fun, and if I gamify it, maybe it can continue to be fun.
How have you gamified it?
I think it's kind of like, even in the process of writing that EPK, it's like, okay, what do I need here? What do people want to see? And for me, it kind of is like a game in terms of like, let's see how other artists I like have written EPKs. And so like, you go on the internet and you kind of see how the professionals do it, or like the artists you idolize do it. And it's like, okay, I can like use that as a format. And I think it's kind of fun to put it together. It then becomes like this like little project. And to also know, I just psychologically and beyond this task, sometimes have to remind myself that like, hey, not all of this needs to get done right now. Not all of this needs to get done today. It can be like little chunks over time. But I think it's just kind of like, I'm a DIY artist, but like, I don't know. Let's look at somebody who's on a label and see how, or who has like a PR team and see how they did it. And let me try my best to like duplicate that. And by golly, it became a cohesive piece of, or it became a cohesive document that was informative and hopefully easy to read and get through,
It definitely is. I think it's great. And as I said, I had worked on these quite a bit for other artists at the Orchard, and it's spot on. It's actually better than some of the ones that we put together, because I didn't do a lot of them for singles though, but I liked how you had the lyrics, you had and this was like 15 years ago, by the way.
Yeah,
like, so
for sure.
It was physical, so there was no YouTube. Like, I loved how you had the YouTube link and like the personnel, all the artwork.
Right.
It's really nice.
Thank you.
And you know what I would recommend to you is you should put these up online on your website if you don't have them on
I was thinking about that too, and the website too is like a work in progress, for sure, as is everything. Of
course,
but yes, I was also thinking about like just like making that like more readily available as I try to discover. I feel like not that we have to talk about WordPress, because WordPress I guess like hosts my website, but it's like they've like made some changes over the years to like the editor and like how they're setting up websites, and I feel like I'm still trying to learn it. And that too is like, I think part of like being a DIY artist, it's like literally, just trying to learn what you can. Sometimes it feels overwhelming and like everything, but it's like at least trying, and I think as much as the internet has made things easier and connected us and democratized a lot of things that were formerly gatekept, it's also just like, I don't know, infuriating to feel like you have to I have to learn how to edit video and audio and learn how to design a website and, be a press person. And it's like so many different hats, which I think have historically been worn by many people throughout time. But somehow the internet makes it easy and more complicated simultaneously. But thus is how it is to live in 2024.
This is true, and I often think about this. Lately, I haven't had to do it with my music as much because I've been focused on the podcast. Right. Actually, a lot more than I kind of anticipated in the beginning, but it is a whole... You're building this, like, podcast factory, I feel like, and I have to delegate some of this out at some point.
Sure.
But yeah, like, it's like so many hats you have to wear, and I do love doing that. I actually do, but it's a lot. And
yeah, it's fun. It's fun to me. I've always considered myself like a multifaceted person. Like, I love that. I I love putting my hands in different things. I like to not be a one-trick pony. I like to be a jack of all trades. But it's, and listen, and it's like, it's kind of unbelievable. And maybe that's also just like how we grew up. Like, before we started rolling, we were talking a lot about like the old PC games that like we played as kids, and we actually had like a lot in common on that. But also with something like, I was recently mentioning this to like some coworkers of mine not long ago, but I was talking about how like in the MySpace days, like, a lot of us just straight up learned HTML5 because if you learned HTML5, you could make a cool profile. And like you wanted a cool profile on MySpace because like that was like the place to like to basically have like your own website that was like, unique and curated to you.
Yeah.
And but we all just like learned it and like we just did it, and that's like kind of crazy. Like basically like this website convinced a bunch of teenagers to like learn coding because it could have a cool result.
No, absolutely. And that's what made me become a web developer, by the way.
That's fascinating.
I was learning code. We were talking about this before too. I also have 2 bachelors. I have one in computer science and one in music tech.
Wow, that's so cool. We both have 2 bachelors.
It's rare, right?
It's
I don't know if I know
rare.
anyone else that has 2
God.
bachelors. Yeah.
Wow.
But I forgot my point.
I think we were just talking about how to be an artist these days, or for always, or to be a DIY artist, is to be multifaceted. And I think I was bringing up my aggravations with WordPress, and then just kind of commenting on how
I said that's how I got into web development. Right. So it wasn't until like my junior year of college that I took a web programming class, and I knew a little from MySpace, right?
Sure.
The immediate gratification of being able to make your own website in a whole nother way at that point.
Right.
Was very intriguing to me, especially as being someone artistically inclined, and I started making like band websites for friends and record label websites for friends that had their own, and it just became a whole like had a mind of its own and led down its own path. But like I think that fun in STEM things has to be there. Like as we were saying, some of these computer games that we played as kids, where it was like the one you were mentioning about the typing.
Jumpstart typing for the listeners who are not privy to that pre-rolled conversation. But Jumpstart typing, man. All those Jumpstart games.
But those typing games are a perfect example of it too, right? Because it's teaching you to type by doing something fun.
Right.
So,
and it's like it's motivating you to continue with the learning because of something cool that's happening on screen, or this progress. There was also another I talked about to Rich previously for the listener. There was a game in Jumpstart Typing, which Jumpstart series was like this educational PC game computer series, and they had one for multiple grades. I think it might have been like grades like kindergarten through 6th grade, and then they also had like this typing game. There might have been more, but with this one typing game, there was like this skateboard kind of rollerblading kind of game, and like as you would type, like your player would like get air and like do cool tricks and like all this stuff. But they also had I think there was like a rock climbing one, and it's like for each rock had like a letter, and so like the faster you hit the letter, the faster your player would like climb to the top of the peak.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Hours spent.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, but in a way, you're doing the same thing now, is what I'm hearing, right?
Sure.
'Cause, like
100%.
you're using your music to learn, and I do the same thing, right? Like I don't mind if I get success almost with these things, even with the podcast. The podcast and the writing music are very similar. It's just the ancillary things are all the same. It's just the actual creativity is different than the music, right? But everything else is the same, and it's like the promotion and the editing and the recording. It's fun to do yourself.
It is, and
really is.
I think it's always like it's like a dance. It's a balance between like I think it depends on like what your goals are, what your definition of success is. But even if you do have desire for success, or you do have lofty goals, which I think is fine and healthy, and God bless, and go after those goals. I mean, sure, like I think everybody's has that. I think it's natural, but I think it's like there needs to be like a sense of detachment too from that. because I think it's like, again, with the internet, it's like it's a lot easier now to be present online, to be an artist and what have you, but it's also easier for everybody else. So, you know, it's tough sometimes, like, to be seen, to be heard. And that's why I think doing things like press is important, because I actually think a lot of bands, artists don't do it. But then the ones that are and that do it are actually like have like a little bit of a leg up, because they're giving people incentives to check them out, to listen to them, or what have you. But it's also kind of like, for me, it's like the detachment in terms of like success or whatever. I think it's just like in terms of like trying to naturally manage expectations so that my mental health remains on an even keel. Because I think it also, too, it can get incredibly frustrating, you know, to feel like you are firing away at all cylinders and feel like, you know, you ain't going anywhere, you know. But at the end of the day, it's like, as long as we can, I think, find community together, us other artists, and like try to have fun and like just take something away or like learn a new skill, you know, I think that's wonderful and great. And even if, like, you know, the folks that we know, or if you and I don't get to open for Taylor Swift in our lifetime, we will still have a beautiful, wonderful life with our art and with the community of people who exist within and around our art. And I think it's like that's the takeaway, you know, for me, that I and the perspective that I like try to keep as I continue.
I have the same perspective, and that's one of the reasons I started this podcast. It was one of the reasons in the music aspect was to make it a forcing function for myself to localize my music consumption. It came up on this podcast, the term, I don't know if it's a real term or not, but well, let's call it musical nutrition.
Oh, sure.
Right? Like consumption nutrition, right? So like for me, I'm just like, it's my own version of eating like the local eggs.
Yeah, that's a good way to see it. That's a good perspective to have, I think.
Yeah, because you could feed back into it, right? Like, right. And it happened at this point now, after having the podcast for 3 years. One of the major changes I've noticed in myself is that when I listen to music that's not related to the podcast, it feels almost not wrong, but it feels like it definitely feels like an indulgence to me,
right?
Which I think is great.
Yeah,
I wanted that.
Yeah, you know? yeah, absolutely.
With Capture the Flag,
I
had a question.
Sure.
That would rope this back to that.
Sure.
But one of the things I wanted to ask before we dive into the actual song is, did the time span of writing and releasing this song help you with that detachment a little bit?
I think so, yeah, because like the way the song came about too is just, if I may indulge in that story as well.
No,
like,
exactly, yeah.
So to answer your question, I think it is a practice in detachment too, because it kind of like took so long to like complete, because I think I didn't intend to record this like at all. I think it was like an opportunity thing. So the way this came about was my EP Northbound I recorded, that was August of 2021, which I recorded with Ace Enders of the early November. And he had a studio in Hamilton, New Jersey called The Lumberyard. And I was actually the last of his art, like the last artist. I was the last artist to record at The Lumberyard before, you know, he closed that studio, which was such a treat and experience opportunity.
That's amazing.
It was wonderful. If to the listeners, like, if you have any opportunity to work with or support Ace, like, please do it. He is a wonderful human being, a talented songwriter, like one of the most incredible people I've ever worked with. But hopping off that for a moment, because I can wax poetic about Ace forever. I recorded Northbound in Hamilton, The Lumberyard, Ace Enders. It was a very new experience for me because my previous studio recorded EP was called Muscle Memory, and that was kind of recorded in Woodland Park at The Den, which is now Cloud Factory Recording in Woodland Park, New Jersey. And Muscle Memory, that EP, I kind of recorded on like my days off from work. And it was kind of like, we're just gonna like, you know, do this thing, work on it days off from work. And so like the recording, like, who knows how many recording sessions there were. It was like a lot, but you know, I would try to do it when I could. The Northbound recording sessions were like, we're gonna block out like 9 to 11 days and we're just gonna focus on this. And for an artist who had not done that before, it is like such a crucible. It is such a crucible to do that, to the likes of which I had not experienced or anticipated.
I haven't done that before, so if you don't mind, tell me.
Yeah, like
that.
I think what I would say, because I think I like learned so much. First of all, for me as an artist, it's kind of like be prepared. One thing I did in the prep for these sessions was like I ended up demoing everything on Logic at home first with like MIDI drums and kind of like fleshed out what I was hearing. That was so helpful because literally day one, I bounced all the audio stems and I had them on a hard drive before, I left for the studio. And Ace basically pulled all the stems into Pro Tools. We matched the BPM to the demo BPM. He removed the MIDI drums and we immediately started tracking drums to the demo track. I cannot tell you how much time and money that must have saved to like do your homework. So like that was very cool in and of itself. But I think, when you are a solo artist in a studio environment, working with somebody as incredibly gifted as Ace, there is still like a psychological component of like, this is really hard. This is really difficult. And even though like I'm doing all the work leading up to this, and like I made chord sheets and you know what I mean? Like I did all my due diligence. Sometimes like sitting in the studio, I would hit like points of frustration. It's like, I cannot come up with a lead right now. And like, and it's like, it's your time, it's your money. And it's kind of like, you're looking at the clock, like, Jesus, like, do it. Do it, Ro. Come up with it. Like, why? Because I think that's the thing, too. And it's like the expectation on yourself as the solo artist to just, like, have an answer for everything. But the fact of the matter, I think, like, with those sessions, I had to be like, I'm not Elliott Smith. And that's okay. I would love to be in some points of his musical genius. I would love that if things seem to come together.
Yeah.
But I think it was kind of like a lot of like, damn, like this is really hard and frustrating and mentally taxing at times. I think to spend like days in a row trying to focus on your 5 songs. But anyway. Going back to Capture the Flag, and we can also like talk about like that entire recording experience. We could like revisit that.
We can open that up,
and it was a wonderful experience. But Capture the Flag came to me. So I was living in like the live room. So like I was staying over at the studios by myself. This also too was like, I'm trying to think in like terms of COVID. I think like vaccine had come out that year, but like there was still like precautions and like people, I was still trying to be like very careful, so it wasn't exactly like going out at night. Like I was kind of just like to myself, hanging out at the studio when night would come. And so usually what I would do is like we'd end the session for the day. I would probably order dinner, bring it back, have a little something, watch a little TV on like my laptop, take a shower, go to bed. That was like pretty much like my nighttime routine. Very, very monastic. Did not very deviate too much outside of that. But what, there was like one night, I think it was like the second or third night maybe, I had, the guitars were out, I'm by myself, there's like no one around. And what was cool about the lumberyard is that it was actually located above an antique shop. So once the antique shop kind of closed for the day, it was like really quiet. Like, there's like nothing going on. But it's that artist thing where it's like, you're alone with your thoughts. Maybe you're not even thinking about anything, but there's still stuff moving through you. And I started playing like these really big open chords, and I kind of just started singing these lyrics. And at the time, I did not know where they came from. And it was very bizarre. And it was one of those moments, I think, as a songwriter, because of course, not all songs come out the same, and the way things manifest are very different. It's, it's not a telltale framework of like, oh yeah, well, like, I do this and this and this and now the song is done. It's like, no, songs sometimes it's melody first, sometimes it's lyrics, sometimes it's the way somebody says something, sometimes you wake up with a melody in your head. It's all different. But with this, it's like, I just started singing these lyrics off the bat. I didn't know what they meant, but I tried not to think about it, and I just tried to let them out. And what does this mean? And I sat with them for a while, and I was just like, God, like, I don't know, what is this? Like, what am I trying to say?
How much of them did you come out with?
I think like all of them. Yeah, okay. I think the only thing, there was like one word change I had made at the end, which was the Daisy's Not Dead, which is like this parallel thing in the beginning. It's like, capture the flag of a day that's gone sour, pick up the pieces, the Daisy's not dead. I ended the song with the Daisy's not dead, but I ended up switching it to something else as the meaning of the song was like coming to me. And I think I sat with it for a while, like for months. We did not record this for Northbound, but it had come to me. And I also think, too, to speak to the way songs come and just my life as a songwriter, I find that if I'm comfortable, like if I feel physically safe, if I'm in a space, you know, whatever, I think that the songs will come to me easier if I feel like at ease. And I think I was just very at ease in that studio. And, you know, that time with Ace, I was just so comfortable. That stuff was just like flowing, you know?
Yeah, and you have nothing on your schedule.
Right.
Too. That helps me a lot.
Took time off work, 100%. This is like the thing I was focusing on.
You're just sitting alone with a guitar.
100%.
Second night. Yeah. That's amazing.
And it was...
I've been there. Like
it's exciting.
Like, yeah. Working from home before COVID, I wrote a lot of songs that way. They didn't always just come out like that, but
it sounds so simple to say, but it's kind of like we're alone now, or I'm alone now. And now that I'm alone, and it's not to say that like, oh, I'm not myself when there's other people around. No, it's not that. I think there's just like a solitude element of the artist where you're like, okay, like I don't know. It's just like you're just more present with yourself or tuned in or something, or you feel safe. I don't know. I think there's maybe like a safety with oneself. And I think also because the act of being an artist, creating, writing, I mean, it's so vulnerable. Yeah.
You're so vulnerable. So my wife will come. I'll have the door closed here, and she like scares the shit out of me.
Yes, this has
all
happened to me
the
as
time.
well.
I don't like it. Doesn't even. I don't even have to be like playing guitar. But if I'm like tracking vocals, I don't have the headphones on or anything. I'm just thinking for a minute, and she walks in.
Right.
You're so vulnerable, and you're like so focused.
Yes.
Too.
Yes, and I think it's just like I also think you I think had mentioned before we were rolling it. You have siblings.
I have one.
You have one sibling.
Yeah.
Are you the oldest or the youngest, if you don't mind?
I'm the oldest.
You're the oldest. What's the age difference between you two?
4 years.
4 years. Okay, so hear this as a theory, because I've thought about this a little bit too. I have an 8-year difference. I am the oldest as well in my family. I have a brother who is 8 years younger than I am. And so what you telling me that you are the oldest tells me that like we know what it's like, even if for a couple years, we know what it's like to be an only child. And I remember being an only child before my brother was born. And I remember playing as an only child too. And I think the things that, you know, the games we'd make up by ourselves to entertain ourselves and to play and have fun and perhaps feel less alone. And I think there's like a deep connection with that inner child sense of self and songwriting. And this is actually, I didn't mean to go here. This is actually kind of where I landed on the meaning of the song, is that while I didn't realize it at the time, I felt like I was looking at the lyrics. I ended up talking to my voice teacher about it, who, by the way, Diane Aragona, His and Hers Music in Bloomfield, New Jersey. Shout out Diane. Shout out His and Hers Music. Go look them up. If you need guitar or instrument lessons and you are local to Bloomfield, New Jersey, please go check out her and her husband, Chuck. They're phenomenal, talented people. And I still see them to this day. Cannot recommend them enough. But I remember playing the song for Diane in a voice lesson. And she actually ended up asking me, she's like, what is this about? And I'm like, I don't know. And she was like, I want you to like go home and I want you to like think about that, because you knowing the meaning of this song is going to influence the way that you're going to sing and perform it. And if you don't know what it's about, you might not, you know, just like be on that. And she was 110% right. And like I brought it home and I was like, God, what the hell is this about? And as I was going through the lyrics, I felt like it was like a letter to my younger self. And like, you know, like the 14, 15-year-old me, who has, of course, now since grown, but, you know, still somewhere resides in, you know, my psyche. And I think I started thinking about who I was as that girl. And I started thinking about, you know, anxiety and worry, you know, that I would feel, I guess, about, you know, acceptance, fitting in, Am I good enough? And all of those things, I think that is totally natural for a teenager to feel and experience. But when you're experiencing it for the first time at that age, God, it just feels like it's going to be forever, that there's no way out, that this is life. You better get used to it. You better, straighten up, buck up and, get in for the long haul because it doesn't get better than this. Because I think that's the thing too. Like a lot of people tell
Everybody says it.
Everybody's like, these are the best years of your life. And you're like, why do I feel like shit all the time? So that made a lot of sense to me when I started looking at those lyrics within that context. And it's kind of presented this question to me of like, man, like, what would we say to ourselves if we could talk to our inner child and tell, and like, what will we say to help them, make sure, assuage their fears and, tell them that everything was going to be okay. Because I know for me personally, like, and I'm sure like a lot of folks too, like I'm not unique in this, but it's like, yeah, like, you know what? The teenage years were absolutely hellish. They absolutely were. And so, but in regards to like, being an only child and, just I think the act of growing up and vulnerability and the sense of play too with just like songwriting in general. I mean, it's funny. I had a conversation once with an old friend of mine, and I forget how we got on the topic, but we were talking about how we used to play, and not like computer games play, but like how we used to play as kids. And this friend I was talking to is an only child, like did not have any siblings, and she played as an only child. And we were just talking about like how we played. And I was like, oh yeah, I was like, I remember being 4 years old or whatever, and I had a big basket of Beanie Babies. It was huge. It's a lot of Beanie Babies. And I would like have my Beanie Babies perform talent shows for each other, and they'd all have a different song, and they would like sing their songs. And my friend was like, what? And she was like, what is that? And I was like, you didn't like do that as like a kid? And she was like, no. I was
really?
Like, oh, I was like,
I did similar things.
I did. I have so many memories of that, like with my Barbies and stuff. Like I would make them sing with each other. And like, I was always, I think as a kid, just like coming up with songs, only child, trying to entertain myself, Yeah. And I think, and again, I think that a lot of this too about like inner child work and like all of this stuff, I too am like still processing it and working on articulating it, because it's kind of like this work in progress or like this discovery in progress. But like, I think it is like all connected. And to me, songwriting in general, not just this song, but like songwriting has always been like this sense of play. Like I get to play, like I get to create words and a melody and music. And it didn't exist before I played it out, and I think staying in touch with who we were as kids is just so important for our mental health, because I just think there's like so much other stuff happening in the world. It's so easy to just like, I don't know, like be cynical and focus on the nitty gritty of life, shall we say, whether that's, finances or whatever. I guess it does basically like root in like financial survival to live in the world. But I think as I get older, it's always been important for me to just like stay in touch with that childlike self and don't forget that sense of play, because I think there's a lot of folks who have lost it. And I don't believe that it's gone forever, like I think that it can always be found again. But I think it's one of those things that it's like if you don't actively work on staying in touch, you can lose it. And in that sense, like I think you can lose a sense of yourself, and that can be like really scary. So
it definitely. Have you ever felt like you have?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, even you saying that reminds me of a time. I mean, like there's other examples for sure, but I remember like reading books has always been a part of my identity. I was reading at 2 years old. My dad was very involved with like the Hooked on Phonics. We were doing the tapes and the big old books and the A and E and all of that stuff. But reading was very much part of my identity. Loved to read. And I felt like in school, because it was like mandatory and difficult to balance at times, felt like once we got to like middle school, high school, I felt like it was like beat out of me. And I'm like, I don't want to read. And I feel like I didn't read for years. And even in college too, I was like, well, how am I going to read? I'm already reading so much. Why would I read for pleasure? This is ridiculous, you know? And you're like, I'm not going to do that. Like, how are you reading? Like, what's wrong with you? But then, like, my senior year of college, I actually had like some time free up in my schedule. And I was like, I started getting into artists like, I started getting into authors like Joseph Campbell.
They're artists.
Yeah. They are artists. But like I started getting into Joseph Campbell and like Carl Jung and Neil Postman. I remember, you know, reading poignant books like Flowers for Algernon, and like I was reading a lot of Maya Angelou, and I'm just like, oh my God, like why have I been depriving myself of this all these years? And I think I was lost during those years because I was kind of like not staying in touch with a piece of my identity. And like now reading is very much a part of my identity in my adult life, and I do actively make the time for it because I value it. I think it's important. I think you get a lot out of books that you don't get out of television. I think books are way more books are way more active ways to consume media and learn things and process information. Whereas TV and film, wonderful. Not shitting on TV and film at all. You know, some of the best stuff is still being made like today. But it is more of like a passive experience. And when you're reading a book, let's say like a work of fiction, there is like work. You got to do work. You got to story build in your own mind based on what the author's telling you. Also, what's cool about books, it's cool. Go support your local library, everybody. What's cool about books is like you can read people's work who have died. So like a couple years ago, I recently read the Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky. Which is a behemoth of a book. But, you know, I was like, this is nuts. Like, Dostoevsky's been, like, dead for years, and yet here I am experiencing this thing from his brain. That was, like, a beautiful... I think I'm no expert on Russian literature by any means, but everybody talks about that book. I read it, and I have to say that one of the big takeaways I got from it was, like, Dostoevsky was, like, masterful at character work, and he makes it look so easy. And it's until I think you try to perhaps write something of that degree, just characters, just, like, shaping characters, you realize how difficult that is. And he does make it so easy, and so he basically creates a lot of characters in that book, and you feel like you know them.
Yeah, I haven't read that book. It's on my. I'm a big reader too. I haven't tackled much of. I've read only not Crime and Punishment actually either. I've only read Notes from Underground of Dostoevsky's The Shorty.
Yes, and listen, and like I'd love to read more. It is a commitment. Like I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I know. No,
not for the faint of heart.
I've dabbled. Like I think the big one that I read was Ulysses.
Okay,
I had a similar experience around the same time.
Right.
I don't think it felt, but you're saying this, I think that was part of me coming back to myself.
Right.
Same time period, I felt like I was lost a little bit.
Yeah.
I think everybody does, right? And college is tough.
It's so hard because I think it's like, you know, you're trying to check a lot of boxes. There's a lot on the line, you know, you becoming a productive member in society, needing to complete a certificate degree program in order to participate in, you know, the capitalistic world that we live in. No matter what you think of it, it's still the world, you know, like you can you can lash out at the things that you don't agree with all you want in regards to the way the world is run, and I always think that those are fights and conversations worth having, absolutely. But at the end of the day, it's like, gotta eat, gotta live in the world, what can I do to facilitate that? And it's very nerve-wracking because you're also like trying to like figure out who you are.
No, exactly. You're trying to compare it with what you grew up in and like the path that you've been shown by your parents. Right. And then I think for me, it actually was freshman year of college because I had gone away. I went to RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology, and I just remember feeling like I'm here. I don't know anybody. Every person you're meeting, you're like, I don't know this person's past.
Right.
Like all of my friends I had known before.
Yeah.
Like a lot of things happened, and people actually some people had passed away that I grew up with, and I came back home, and when I saw my friends, that was the beginning of me being like, I need to reevaluate here. Like I have a lot of friends that are going to school in Jersey or New York.
Right.
I need that anchoring like in my life.
And I think like, you know, different strokes for different folks. Like maybe there's people who like they go far away and they thrive. I don't know if I was ever like that. I mean, I went to school pretty local, you know, first bachelor's was at Ramapo, second bachelor's was at Montclair State University. But like, yeah, like there is kind of like this, you feel like untethered or something, and like not in a good way, and you're kind of
like I came home and I went to Stevens and I
Yeah.
immediately felt like I still had that when I went away, but I immediately felt like, okay, but if I'm having a bad weekend, I can still go hang out with my friends that like are going to school locally as well.
Sure,
Like,
absolutely.
I can go visit somebody in the city that I'm friends with. And like,
right. And
yeah, the
have that
untethered
touchstone.
it's tough for it's
Absolutely.
tough for some people more than others, right? Some
Yeah.
people thrive on it.
Yeah.
They need that separation.
Right.
I wonder if that comes back to that this is going to require me to do some batch processing during the week, but I wonder if that plays into the inner child and the birth ordering. I think about that stuff, all of that you were talking about a lot, especially being a parent now too.
Oh, true.
The birth ordering and, you know, like what is the essence of me versus what am I programming in, or what is the essence of the kid versus what are you programming, all of that. But like
nature and nurture.
Yeah. But yeah, like just I wonder how that all plays into wanting to leave or not. Like, because I do have some friends that just like one of them that pops into my head, like he was gone. Like he definitely just wanted to go to school in Colorado. Like he had his family's fine. It's not like he like had he came home all the time. He had a good relationship, but he just wanted to be untethered.
Yeah. And I think listen, like I think that's like great. And that's awesome. And I think it's just sometimes it's like maybe it's like an introvert extrovert thing.
It could be.
And it's kind of
Do you ever envy it? Do you ever envy it?
Envy what? Like folks who can go out like untethered or what?
Yeah. The untethered. Yeah. I definitely do.
There's a beautiful freedom in that. I think that, you know, and it's tough. I think like, first of all, I do consider myself, you know, relatively introverted. And you know what it is? And sometimes I feel like as I get older, I try to remind myself to try to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, meaning, you know, try to push yourself out of your comfort zone every once in a while, because the older you get, the more curmudgeonly you might become because you're used to doing things a certain way for a certain period of time. But like, you know, yeah, I think I do envy it. But I also feel like there's also a degree of like, I feel like I know what works for me psychologically. But at the same token, it's like, you know what, I'm not, if I did have to, I guess, if circumstances presented themselves where perhaps I did have to like go to Colorado unprompted alone or something, you know, it's like I know I'd live and, you know, I would make the best of it, even though that would not be like my first choice, you know? But yeah, I think there is a beautiful freedom in that. And I love that folks like don't have to think about it at all. Just like, yeah, just go to Colorado. God bless. So
no, same. That was a good little tangent.
Yeah.
It's an awesome song. I think that this all is kind of, you know, a lot of background kind of psyche of where it's coming from on that song, and I like that because if folks are listening and the song is out now, you can remember what we're talking about here, and you get that. It's like now you have that little Cliff Note reminder if you want to go in there.
Yes, and if the song isn't out like on Spotify by the time this podcast comes out, which is totally cool and fine, there is like a live clip that does exist on YouTube as well. So if the song is not out proper like on Spotify, you can find that live clip on YouTube. But I will say that the studio version does have, you know, like drums and some really cool guitar going on that the live version does not. And kind of on that topic too, I think just to, I guess maybe just round out the life of the song and like how it was recorded. So picking back up, so like I'm in Hamilton. It's August of 2021. You know, summer. I'm living in the live room. Also too, the live room at Ace's studio had like these really cool like ceiling lights that like would change color. So it was really cool because like all the lights would be off, but there would be like these lights in the ceiling, and like you could cycle them, or like they'd be like blue and like magenta and green, and like it'd be like dark. It was like a very cool vibe. But anyway, I wrote the song kind of while I was there. Just like kind of flew out of my brain. I might have mentioned it to Ace, might have played it, but I was like, God, it's so new. We're like not recording this. Like I need to like sleep on this. Like I need to like digest it. And And we kind of already, I think, like had like the songs picked out that like I wanted to do. But, you know, the rest of the recording session, you know, went great. And, you know, came home, you know, lived life, you know, Northbound ends up coming out. But Ace actually ended up having a songwriter's retreat during the summer of 2022 in Ocean City, New Jersey, where his, I believe, current studio still is. It doesn't have a name, but that's where he's at now. And it was really cool. And it was like a couple days, like come down to Ocean City, New Jersey, and we'll do like some songwriting stuff. And I was like, oh, cool. Like, this is awesome. So like, I immediately like signed up, like got an Airbnb, like I was like, took off work. You know, and other folks signed up as well. And I was like, oh, this is like so cool. It's going to be like a collaborative thing. And I'm trying to think, I feel like the first day of the retreat, it was like it was like maybe like 5 days, or it was like a little less than a week, I think, is like how long it was supposed to last. And something happened where like folks, for various different reasons, were like flying in and like got held up at the airport for like that first day. And for whatever reason, the way it panned out, it was like, it was only me that first day. And it was cool. And it was cool. Like, you know, I kicked it with Ace and also Dylan Ray. Shout out Dylan. Dylan plays bass in the early November, and also is like a great artist in his own right, songwriter in his own right, and he played banjo for Ace. Ace kind of went on some solo dates with the Spill Canvas recently. At the time of this recording, it was recent, and you know, Dylan was playing banjo and stuff. So anyway, but Dylan was there. I don't think I had met Dylan before. I think it was my first time meeting him, but Ace was there, and so it was Saturday, and so folks who were supposed to come got like held up at the airport, and like they couldn't come that day, and they were going to be coming like Sunday or Monday, and so we were kind of like in the studio, and we like did like some songwriting stuff, and kind of like midday hit, and I think Ace just turned to me and was like, well, I want to work on a Roe song. And I was like, okay, like, sure. I was like, how about this? And like, and I pulled out the song that I wrote in his studio the year before. And he was like, yeah, that's like really good. Okay, let's do that. And so proceeded to kind of like use this day of this songwriting retreat to record, you know, guitar and vocals of the song. And then I don't recall if it was like that same day or maybe it was like later on in the retreat. But then it might have been that day. But then Dylan ended up being like, oh, I want to like put some drums on this. And he put some drums on it and it sounded great. And he it really, I think the, you know, as we're referencing different artists and bands and stuff, it had like this, he kind of put like this Jimmy Eat World vibe to this song that quite frankly, when I wrote it, I never envisioned it with drums. And what he added in there, man, it just gave it so much life and energy and rhythm, and I loved it. And then, Ace kind of laid down bass and guitar, and he just did like a beautiful job. And I had like no notes. I was like, guys, like this sounds phenomenal. Like, and I think also too, Ace and I got into the show Friday Night Lights because of Ace. If you're familiar, the Friday Night Lights like kind of like theme song.
I never watched it. I'm familiar with the show though.
It's a great show. But the thing, so one of the very cool things about the show is like, if you know, it came out in like the early aughts, and a lot of like the transition music, including like the main title of Friday Night Lights. First of all, the main title of Friday Night Lights is a song by the band Explosions in the Sky, kind of like very emo, a lot of like twinkly guitars, like, right? But a lot of the transition music is too, which I feel like is really cool, kind of like a time capsule, speaks to the time in which we were living with like emo and whatever. It was really cool. And Ace just kind of like started adding these like Friday Night Lights-esque, you know, guitar riffs. I'm like, this sounds awesome. Like, this sounds like
That's
like
so
really
cool. Bringing
it home, you know, emo style, you know, and he crushed it. And I think my number one rule, whenever I work in the studio with anybody I work with in the studio, and I'm collabing with somebody, and you know, we're working on songs or whatever, bottom line is, it sometimes doesn't even matter what I want. F what I want. It's all about what serves the song. What serves the song? How can we make that happen? You know what I mean? Like, I'm always interested in chasing that, because F my ego. Like, you know, and that's also to say things too. Like, if I have a problem with something, or like if I feel strongly about the way something sounds, I'll voice it. but I'm also kind of like, it's not that like we have to be, okay, well, Rose said that, we have to like cut that out. And it's like, no. I'm open. This is how I feel, but I'm open to like the discourse. Let's talk about it. Am I being an idiot because this is my song and like I'm hyper focused on it? And like, is nobody really going to hear like a breath there? Or like, is this cymbal really not too loud? Whatever. Like little stuff like that. Because artists, we get in our own head.
Yeah, totally.
So
everyone does
100%.
when you're deep into something.
So natural, especially when it's coming from your own brain.
Yeah.
So suffice to say, that's how the song was then recorded. And then it did take a while, I think, with just scheduling and stuff to just kind of get it mixed and whatever. And so I ended up going down to the studio, I guess it was like this past November. Ace mixed it, we listened to it, talked about it, felt good about it. And that was really it. And then finally, we kind of had like the bounced and the completed song was done. But it was so interesting because it's like, here is the song that I wrote when I was recording with Ace for the first time that didn't make the Northbound EP. We did a songwriting retreat and had an opportunity to record it. And I'm like, this is cool. It's like now we're in the new studio space recording the song, with the same dude and Dylan. And then it was kind of like, oh wow, and like now this is like a fully completed song. And and I think the plan is I'm just going to release it as a single. I don't know if it's going to go on like some larger work or whatever. And I think that's also like a whole other like kind of like music business conversation about like the single and does it need to be part of a cohesive whole in order for it to be a single? Because I feel like I there's so many artists I follow who they're just dropping singles. I'm like, that's fine, that's cool, and it is what it is. But anyway, but that's kind of like the life cycle story of Capture the Flag. And I think I also open it up to further discourse among fans and friends or whoever listeners, with how the song makes them feel, and maybe they feel the same about the inner child work psyche, having a conversation with their younger self. Maybe they don't. Maybe the lyrics invoke something totally different for them, and I think that that's totally valid. I think as an artist, I'm not so concerned of like, this is the song meaning and this is it, this is how I, the artist, intended it. It's like, no, sometimes people hear songs in different points in their life and it hits them in different ways, and I think sometimes people can take on different meanings to songs, and I think most of the time, like, that's totally okay. I think, like, I'm very willing, I think, as an artist to be like, this is what it meant to me, this is how I wrote it, this is kind of what I was thinking, but like, hey, if this serves you in a different way other than what I've said, I think that that's totally valid, because the song is also yours. It's also the listeners, it belongs to you too. Music is like a very emotional thing, and I know I felt very possessive about songs that I like. For example, one of my favorite records, I think, to come out, I think this was, God, I don't know what year it was. I'm going to look it up briefly. Watch My Moves by Kurt Weill. Really great album. I was not into Kurt Weill before, but he's got a couple tracks on there that were very quintessential to me during a very like low period in my life when I was going through like some like emotional turbulence. And those songs too, I feel like I want to like tell the listeners the songs. So this is Kurt Weill, Watch My Moves. Flying Like a Fast Train was huge for me. And he's got another song called Like Exploding Stones. And like, I don't know where Kurt Weill was when he was writing that or what those songs mean to him. I really frankly never did a deep dive into that. But I know that when I hear those songs, I'm reminded of that time in my life, kind of in a beneficial way, because this is a very specific example of just like, these songs were hitting me in such a way that they were like a blanket, and I was kind of like going through like a tough time, and like, man, these songs would come on and I felt like they were like comforting and like kind of commiserating and like the emotional pain I was experiencing. And it's like, as a listener, yeah, it's like I take possession of that. Like, these songs mean a lot to me, man. Like, those songs still come on, and I'm just like, oh, this is so great. This is so awesome. This song helped me, But at the same token, it's like, maybe Kurt Weill was like in a totally different place, and the things that I think of, he does not associate. But I think, it's all part of like the music ecosystem and all of that.
Yeah, you're like loading in. Music is magic, right?
Yeah.
And it's like loading in. And I've talked with folks about this that are, they get psychedelic about it, and they're like, you're literally vibrating your body, and like
totally,
there's that's happening for sure. But you're also loading up when you're listening to that. You're feeling these things, and even without a blanket, sometimes I notice myself just like, I just need to frickin' listen to "Killing in the Name" by Rage Against the Machine, 100%. Right? Like, and it makes you feel better to just like take a walk if I'm mad at somebody or something, and it's just like, yeah, can you just scream at me for a minute, because I need to feel that.
And even like, as somebody who like commutes in and out of New York on like a semi-frequent basis, like sometimes like I just need that on, "Killing in the Name of," while I'm walking through Port Authority. Like, get the fuck out of my way, exactly. Like I was just like, I gotta walk.
I do love walking through. I'm just going to bring this up as a tangent too, because I've commuted a lot as well. One of my favorite things to do as a introverted extrovert also is I just love walking through Port Authority or Penn Station and feeling surrounded by people that I don't know.
Right, yeah.
Like just in my own world, but also with people, as long as they're not bothering me. I do find comfort in that.
On that
I miss that.
Similar tip is that I think, and this is I think like me getting older and just being like, whatever. I feel like I feel like more free in New York to like vibe to like music and like move my body and like sing along to lyrics, and like I don't care if I look batshit crazy. But like I think, because I think like we've seen people like that, right? I mean, like those people in life. Like how many times have we seen somebody like vibe into a song on headphones or not, and they're just like in it, and they're just moving and singing and whatever. And I think at first my reaction is like, oh my god, this guy's like nuts. And then the second reaction is like, oh, maybe I'm judging and thinking that guy's nuts because like I don't have the gall to do that and be free. Yeah. I mean, and
You're
that's the thing too, man.
Yeah.
Talk about like being free.
Or being your inner child too, right? Like kids don't care.
Exactly. And in the same token, like no one in New York cares. Like go vibe, go listen to, as long as you're not hitting anybody, touching anybody or freaking anybody out, and nobody's bothering you. It's like, it's just freedom. Like if I'm, and maybe I want to dance in place. Maybe I want to lip sync to myself in the subway glass. Who cares? So I think it's also too, like as an adult, learning to be more comfortable with yourself by remembering how you didn't have those kind of inhibitions and thoughts and worries like as a kid. Just be. I think it helps, at least for me personally, like to think in that way helps to like alleviate anxiety.
You got to kind of quell your inner teen to let out, to connect your adult back to the 100%. Child.
Yes.
Do you think that your inner teen would vibe with "Capture the Flag," right? Like, because you were writing the lyrics to it in that way, and then by what you're getting the instrumentation, it seems like the whole thing is kind of anchored in that time period.
Right.
And how do you think you would feel if you like went back in time and were like,
listen to
I
this.
wrote this for you? That's
an excellent question, cool. Rich. I didn't even think about that, and I think about a lot. No, that's a fascinating question. I to honestly answer, I don't know if she'd like it, and I'm going to tell you why. And it's not because thinking about myself at 14-year-old Roe was a walking anxiety spasm, and I think very worried about what she would be perceived as, and I think you must have lived through this too. When we were growing up, like there was kind of like for a time there was like, well, if you like punk, you can't like hip hop, and hip hop's not art, and like posturing, and I guess that posturing has always existed. I feel like now it's more fluid, but maybe it's just because we're adults now. But I don't know. But like there was like a lot of that, and I think that if within that vein, thinking about that era that like we grew up, it's like, would she be afraid to like it? And I think there were artists like that, like I was afraid to like, because you knew these were artists that were like, well, that's like emo.
Yeah. Oh, totally. For me, I was very deeply ingrained in that.
It was very difficult, I think, for me to, as a child or as a teenager, to like be so open and honest with everything I was listening to. And I think there were a lot of artists I felt like I listened to in secret or like didn't talk about, like, I don't know, like, yeah, like maybe like Dashboard Confessional, or like, yeah, maybe like Hawthorne Heights. Like, I really liked I think Silence in the Black and White was their record. I don't know if that was their debut record, but like that was the one with like, Ohio's for Lovers and Nikki FM. And like, I really dug it, but like, I felt like I didn't have a safe space to talk about it. And here's the thing too, it's like, I'm not like a hard stand for like, Silence in the Black and White, like, justice for some, but I think it's like, and I'm willing to continue to like, yeah, we can tease the genre. I get it. We can still, have that discourse and like play with it. But, I don't know. I hope she would like Capture the Flag. I hope she would find something in it for her. But I think, that's the weird conundrum too. It's like, maybe she wouldn't have lived enough life to like accept and appreciate it because she hadn't yet fully lived enough life to accept and appreciate the things within herself. But I think that's what's so interesting to me. I think about like growing up and maturity. It's like, God, it really is like all a work in progress. And it's still honestly happening now in our adult life. I mean, we are still learning, changing, growing, and I think ultimately for me, it's like, I'm trying to be a better human being. I'm trying to show up for myself. I'm trying to show up, for others and do that with like full intention. Because it's like, I care. I care about other people. I care about myself. I value myself. I value and care about other people. But yeah, I hope she would, but I'm not sure because I think, I could be, a hardliner. I think I really could. And sometimes that was because I was opinionated and as a 14-year-old or whatever. And I think some of it was actually also because of abject fear that if I said or did the wrong thing, I would get made fun of for it. And I think a lot of my childhood, when I look back on it, was like, yeah, like I think it was like rooted in that. And it's funny because sometimes like I almost wish it's like a stupid wish, but like that you can almost like go back and relive it as you are now. But of course it's like, yeah it's not going to be the same because it's like these are the experiences that make us who we are, and they're hard. Hard lessons. They're hard lessons to learn and reflect on. But when you come full circle with that, I don't know. It's like you're like, oh, I didn't have to be so worried about that. And if somebody made fun of me because I was listening to Dashboard Confessional, they could like fuck right off. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
They really could. Like, it doesn't mean anything to them. And that's still true now. It's like, I don't. I got issues with other artists or whatever. It's like, I don't like everything. But it's like, that's my opinion. If, y'all go listen to it. It is what it is.
And, and I think back to my high school, and I think that I could have had more friends if I wasn't as opinionated or like highbrow about my music tastes. If I had just given some stuff more of a chance, because it's like the people that were listening to, because I didn't even like give that stuff a chance. And my cousin that I'm very close with, he's like my brother, right? He was very deep into the emo music stuff. It was like my first genre that I got into as a preteen was like from skateboarding games. So I was into the punk music, and then there was like a short stint of classic rock, and then like the Strokes came around like sophomore year, freshman year of high school.
Right.
And from then on out, it was like Strokes World, whatever, all of those bands.
Sure.
And I didn't have time for anything else. If I had time for other things, it was like the New York Dolls or like the older punk stuff. Sure. Like that was all cool. Hip hop was all, I was modern on my hip hop.
Yeah.
But the emo stuff, it wasn't even like, I was like, I just don't even have time to consider it.
Right.
And I'm like, why? Those people were like really fucking into music too.
Yeah.
I could have been friends with them, and absolutely. I am now after coming around.
Yeah.
Like, there was an album that someone had just shared at work that got re-recorded, and I had never listened to it before. It was the Thrice album.
Okay.
And I was like, I never listened to this.
Yeah.
And I put it on. This was like a year ago now.
Right.
And I was like, this is freaking good.
Yeah.
Like, I should have listened to this back in the day.
Sure.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have never thought about this before, but it's
and like
cool.
now my music tastes are like ridiculously diverse. Like, don't ask me what I listen to because I'm gonna have to like look at Last FM or Spotify. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'm completely absorbed
Same.
in everything.
Yeah.
But you know, and I think I was then too. I mean, and that's the thing too. Hip hop's really funny too. I remember a lot of like stands about like, oh, you can't like punk and you can't like hip hop or whatever. Like, you know, you're not, you know, hip hop's like not art. I remember like getting this like some MySpace battle with like some stranger, like hip hop's not art. Like, but it's like, well, first of all, it is. But you know, there was so much posturing. And I think just ultimately speaking, I think it's easy to hate shit. Or
It absolutely is, especially when you're a kid. You know,
I think that when you're a kid, you know, you're building your identity, and so you have these things that you gravitate and align with. And then when somebody goes, "Hey, what about this?" and you're like, "Fuck that, this is me," because it's just
exactly.
you know, it's so easy to be like, "I don't know what that is, but it sucks," or like whatever, or to just there's like a lot of like peer pressure and like calling each other names and like judging each other by like what we listen to, and it's just like, you know, ultimately it's like I'm just concerned. I when I listen to music is like a lot. I think like I'm looking for something that's going to make me feel something, right? And that's not always easy. I think especially too when you get older and you got like your tried and true songs that like you like and whatever. But it's like, you know, I want to feel something, and then but you know, what does it mean to feel something? You know, is it the production? You know, is the lyrics a certain way where I'm like, oh, and like I kind of like stop and I'm like, you know, I listen and I'm like, oh, that's really different. I really like that. You know, I think there's different ways that you could like quote unquote feel something. In best case scenario, it's, you know, it's everything. It's, you know, it's the lyrics, it's the singer, it's the delivery or whatever. But it's just like, you know, I try to give everything a chance, to the point where like my Spotify is like an absolute nightmare. I have so much stuff saved that I'm slowly working my way through. I feel like I'm at least like 6 months behind. Like I have like albums that I saved like easily from like August of last year that I'm like, oh yay, we're finally starting to get into this. You know, and I try to listen to like the new groundbreaking stuff, you know, like the Cowboy Carters and what have you, like when I can. But you know, it's when I think back at my younger self and the era that I guess like that we lived in or whatever, it's like, you know, I feel badly that, you know, we were not able to be free in perhaps our music choices or, you know, or in what we felt like we could talk about and be safe. And I think it does come back down to like that vulnerability element. And kind of like when we were talking before about how when you and I are alone as artists and we're like, oh, okay, like, you know, now I can, there's like kind of like you can be at ease with yourself. And I think it's kind of like a blessing to be at ease with yourself, because I think that there are folks who can't. And I think as an artist, like at least like as artists, like we're at least in touch with that.
I like crave that.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what made me realize I'm an introvert.
Right.
Even. It's just like, no, I have to be alone.
100%.
Like, it's not just like I like to, like look at us, right? Like we both were talking about this before. Like we both like to have conversation.
Right.
We both like to talk.
Yeah.
I love it. Like at work, I notice that if I'm sitting at my desk, I will talk to people.
Oh, 100%.
And I have to go. I have to remove myself and go sit in a quiet place to work on purpose.
Yes.
And I think that's a total introvert move. Mm-hmm. It's not like I can't work. I have to work alone. Yeah. I can't like be sitting around talking and working.
I'm with you. And sometimes it's tough because it's like I will literally talk the day away.
So,
because,
same.
You know, we'll just keep talking. And, you know, and it's fun and I'm having fun and we're having a dialogue and it's like, actually, I gotta get back to work.
There's like, you
know, but yes, I think there is like a sense where it's like, with being an introvert, it's like, I gotta recharge my batteries. I have to rejuvenate myself, you know? And, I think creative fields in general are basically, they're like meditations, you know? And when I say meditations, I think I mean it is a solitary exercise, usually, that requires or requests that you be fully present in that moment and not think about what's going on in the world, unless if perhaps that pertains to your art, I guess. But like, you know, it's really like this internal check-in. And I think when, you know, you do it right, you can like hit this really nice flow state, and really just kind of be like flowing in it, you know, whether you're working on a song or a painting, or, you know, maybe you're editing something, or, you know, maybe you're a photographer or whatever. It's just, and again, I just think that these are huge, important elements of the human experience that I think a lot of people don't regard at all. And it's so important. I'm talking about like maybe like non-artists, or maybe artists who have lost their way temporarily. It's like that communion with yourself is so important, because it brings you back down to earth. You know, the world is crazy. You know, it's like, what are you doing for you? What are you doing to check in with yourself? And it's not even to say that you have to center yourself as an artist and write a capture the flag about, you know, getting in touch with your inner psyche. I mean, you can write about anything, but at the same token, as long as you are present for it and, you know, making, I think, like, you know, informed creative choices based on where you're at that moment, you know, that's the thing. And of course, it always sounds so much easier than it really is sometimes. Like, I know, like, the way I'm making it sound, there's days where I'm like, it ain't that easy, you know, it's really difficult, even sometimes to find time. But I think if you can find it, it can be, you know, incredibly rewarding and rejuvenating. And I think also, too, to listeners who might not identify as a creative, or, you know, they're like, well, I'm not a DIY artist or whatever. I say, like, you don't have to be, but you also can be at any time. And it doesn't matter, I think, like, how experienced you are or whatever. I think if you decide today that, like, you know, you want to start writing songs, or maybe you want to go out, get a sketchbook and start making art, and it out of the blue, informed by nothing, just because, man, just do it. I don't know, like, set a timer for like 25 minutes, see what happens. I think it's just so important to just like stay in touch with yourself. I think it's like a sanity, you know, pressure valve, you know, just so important. And at least for me, I think, thinking about when I was a kid and I started actually writing songs and graduated from Beanie Baby songs to actually, like, you know, writing songs, yeah. Man, that was such a pressure release for me. You know, even if the songs were horrible, like, you know, no one's performing what they wrote at 14, but like, just to have an outlet, whether it was, I was writing stuff after school or before bed. I mean, man, there was a point in my life, I feel like probably started in middle school, I was writing a song a night. Before I could even play guitar, I was just writing a song a night.
Wow.
And I would just,
cool.
Notebook, song a night, yeah. Boom, next night, song, boom. And it, you know, about who I had a crush on, or like, you know, you know, parental.
That's really great.
Headbutt. Yeah, and it was just like, I would do it a lot. And I think, like, I realized, I never took a songwriting class, but I did have a friend who took one in college, and she was telling me, like, what she was doing. And I'm like, this is bizarre, because you're doing this in a class, and I was like doing this as a teenager. And like some of the exercises were like, oh, you're taking a song that, like, a popular song, and you're rewriting the lyrics for it. And I'm like, that's like some of the first stuff I did.
That all the time.
The Good Charlotte Self-Titled was like a very formative album for me, and love that, played that CD to death and studied that lyric booklet to death. And I think I started without knowing what I was doing. I was like 12, and I was just like, oh, I'm gonna like write East Coast Anthem, but like not with these lyrics, but like with my lyrics. And like, cool. and then I found out that like these were like songwriting exercises, and I was just like, oh, I was just like really bored and home alone and loving.
I had
songs.
A similar thing for me. The unlocker for that was in like 4th grade. I got into Weird Al Yankovic.
Oh wow!
And he, you know, like right from when he was doing that, I just started making up my own songs to stuff. I get like people get mad at me for doing it all the time. That's like my favorite thing to do.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, and it's fun, and that's what I mean. Like, it's like a game. It's play. And it's self-expression, and, you know, it's all of that. But, you know, just, I loved doing that stuff. And now it's just like, I think I've graduated to the point where, like, I don't need those frameworks anymore. You know, I can write stuff a little more independently without the training wheels now. But, man, I do reflect on it sometimes, and I'm like, you know, what possessed me, man? I mean, like, nobody told me to do that. Like, I was just like, I just love this album.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's your own way of study too, right?
100%.
Like to regurgitate things in that way.
It's like sometimes like what I say, like with stuff like that, it's like self-assigned homework. It's like,
it is,
you know what I mean? And it's like,
yeah.
and that's okay to be an adult and have self-assigned homework. Assign homework to yourself. That's okay. The learning doesn't stop because we're done with college or high school. Like, continue to learn, you know, be accountable, continue to learn new things, because you are in control. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you are the reason why you perhaps will or will not learn something.
Oh, absolutely. And especially if you want to be a do-it-yourself musician. And I think probably that's like a cart before the horse type situation. I think the do-it-yourself musicians probably just do that themselves, because you become a do-it-yourself musician because you're doing it yourself.
Right.
But I agree. You know, it's you got to do that on your own.
Yeah, because it's like no one's gonna do it for you, I guess, you know. And I'll share a really funny, I laugh now, like juvenile thought that I had when I was a kid, maybe even before a teenager. My first, like, I'm trying to think. I don't remember when this was. I remember getting the NSYNC self-titled CD, and it was huge. It was formative. They were everywhere, and also, but like I remember that like. It wasn't necessarily, and this also I think was true with Britney Spears' Baby One More Time. I did not go out and ask my parents to buy these CDs because I liked the music. I mean, I do like the music, but like it was more like there was such a huge cultural moment happening.
Sure.
That like everybody was on board, and it was like for you to also participate in the culture, you had to buy this stuff. And I remember listening, of course I got hugely into this as a young girl especially. And I remember wondering like, how did these people like become famous? Like, what happened here? Did like somebody like put them together? Like, was there a team? And I think there was like a part of me that was like, and I think there's actually that is kind of what happened with like NSYNC. That's
exactly what happened. But yeah.
But even like with like Britney Spears and like the Mickey Mouse Club and like even like, you know, Justin Timberlake was on Mickey Mouse Club too. And I'm like, and I think I had this idea that's like, oh, it'll all work out and like I'll make it big and like somebody will just like discover me and put me in like a group. Like I think I had like this thought that like someone will find me.
That was like part of, I've thought of that before too as a kid.
Yeah, like
it wasn't a huge part of my identity, but it was a dream for sure. Yeah. Like for me, it's funny with NSYNC, that was like given to me by my mom. I didn't even ask for it. She just gave me that. I had the cassette.
I just remember getting in the car one day, and like it was in the car, and everybody was talking about it, and I was just like, oh yeah, tearing up my heart. Like this is really good. And oh my god, and like Justin's so cute, like with his bleach blonde hair, you know. But yes, like I don't remember asking for those records at all. I do remember asking for like records like later. Like I remember like my Christmas list for like like 2002. I remember I asked for Sum 41's Does This Look Infected? Nice, and I think I can't believe my parents bought it, but they did. They did buy me the censored version, but like I was shocked that they did. Because that was like not within their vein at all. And like if you know the cover art for Does This Look Infected, like it's terrifying. Like you would buy this for your 11-year-old daughter. I don't know if I would. It's like kind of crazy, right?
Yeah.
But they did. But you know, like I wasn't like requesting these pop acts, but they were just huge.
Oh, sure.
You know, how did you live through the 90s? And like, you know, how did you live?
They're iconic CDs.
Yeah.
Like
these CDs, like, you know.
Changing gears, I want to ask you. I want to ask you something about. We can still use, because it's been a while. We'll probably on a future episode we'll talk about other songs. I think it's good to use this as the frame. Yeah. But one thing that I noticed throughout all of your music, is your vocal style is really of a high caliber.
Oh,
so I really like it. I really like your vocal delivery.
Thank you.
I do want to shout out one piece that's not in this song, and it's just such a little thing. But in let me look through my notes.
Sure.
There's one song where you have that one. You might even know, right? I think is it in Live? It's in Line Drive.
Okay.
I love that little you give. when you're like, I just want to say you're my saving grace. Yeah. I love that. That's a separate side shout out, because that's like my favorite moment of all your music, I think. Yeah.
Line Drive, if I can speak on it too.
You can, of course.
Was also just, I think, interesting to write. And I think I know exactly what you're talking about. You're my saving grace. Yeah. Like,
yeah,
I think that's
exactly.
like that kind of like that feeling of like, I'm in love with you and like I like you. You know what I mean? And you're like,
I do, yeah.
It's like that conversational.
In your own, like that's the way you say it to yourself.
Yeah.
And you put that in there.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I can hear that, and it's just very authentic.
Oh, thank you. I
dig it.
appreciate that. Line Drive, actually, if believe it or not, that melody came to me in a meditation, an actual meditation.
Oh, really?
And it was COVID times. I remember it very clear. I remember it very clearly because I think I also like immediately recorded a video and uploaded it to Instagram because I was like, this is crazy.
Cool.
Because I couldn't believe it as it was happening. But I was meditating. It was April 2020. The world was on fire. Trying to make the time to meditate and trying to do the right thing. And I was sitting down, could not get comfortable. Like, could not. My back was hurting. I was like shifting. I was like, God, like just like, getting frustrated with myself. Like, sit still. Like, come on. Like, get it together. Like, meditate. Like, hello. Like, and if anybody out there, like any listeners have like meditated, this should be hilarious to you because I think yes, everybody has been here at one point or another. It's not just like the gong hits and like, oh, we have found peace. No, it's like sometimes really frustrating and annoying, and you're trying to hit it, and it ain't always great. But I went into it finally, kind of like stood still. Back was still hurting. I'm sitting there, going through, I use Headspace for like, guided and unguided meditation. And I was like, doing my breathing. And probably about halfway through, I started hearing the melody, da 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 na 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 na. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's like definitely something. And of course, like now you're meditating. So now you're like, oh, okay, I gotta let that go, right? Gotta probably let that go. And I'm like, I can't let it go. And I didn't. And so I did sit and with it over and over and over was repeating the melody to myself and immediately got up and grabbed the guitar. And I think I had to like find the key because I didn't know where I was. And finally like found some chords that like corresponded. And I had like a very early lyric and, sat on it for a while until it like became what it became. But I had it ready by the time, I was demoing and then I recorded with Ace, I guess the following year. But yeah, that was like nuts to me. I think as a songwriter, like that's where that came from. That's bizarre.
That is nuts.
It was totally like, and I think it's like one of those things where it's kind of like, people say that like your best ideas come to you like in the shower. Yeah. I think it's like that thing. Yeah. It's kind of like trying to turn the mind off. And the mind is the mind. So instead of the mind going like, ah, yes, listen to the breath, peace and meditation, my mind's going da 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 da. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what is that? Yep. So that's kind of how Line Drive came to be. But I'm so glad that you love that little I love it too.
It's great.
And it's just a beautiful love song. And I think anytime I can work like baseball or Star Trek into songs, it's a win because those are like two loves of mine.
Cool, yeah.
And I just felt like I think when you're an artist, you're kind of like what do I have to say, what's been done, what hasn't been done. And I don't know, sunshine hitting like a line drive, I just thought that was like a lyric that like made sense to me. And I like I saw it, I felt it, like as you know what I mean, like in the car on the parkway, and like, man, that sun, oof.
Exactly. No, I love that because I think that, like you're saying, what hasn't been done, but like Roe Knows best hasn't been done. So like the best way to find your own artistic voice is to actually hone in on those idiosyncratic things that seem like they fit out of place in your life, and those are the things that define you as an artist.
Yeah, for sure.
That melody is the first 5 notes or some Beach Boys song. I'm trying to figure out which one
you're
it
right.
is.
It's like I don't something I don't know the answer or something like that. What's that Beach
one
Boys
of the
song?
Pet Sound songs. Yeah. I was thinking about it a long time ago.
Yeah.
And when I first heard the song, but when you sang it just now, I was like, it's the Beach Boys. I thought
That's
it was
bizarre.
Weezer
Yeah.
for a while. I think it's a Weezer song.
No, I think you're right with the Beach Boys
Pet
thing.
Sounds. It's some Pet Sounds thing.
It's hold on. I think it's I Know There's an Answer. Right? Is that right? Let me see. Or maybe not. I don't think it is. I can definitely also vouch and verify that I was absolutely not listening to the Beach Boys, but of course it's like once it's inside of you, it's inside.
You Still Believe in Me.
Yeah, You Still Believe in Me. Okay. Yes. And that's a great song.
It's not the same melody, but it's just a similar
related.
vibe.
Yes, very similar vibe. Yeah, I didn't notice it was like until I started doing voice lessons with my friend Diane, shout out His and Hers Music again. I didn't even realize that they were octaves, and I was like, "Oh, that's what they are. They're octave jumps." Da 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 da. But and also I will have to say, because I worked on that song, but this is post recording Northbound, because after I recorded Northbound, I started taking lessons with Diane, and we worked on that song a lot. It was a good introductory song to kind of work on my singing technique because of those octave jumps.
Cool.
But we really kind of like worked it just to make it better, in live scenarios. But it's once I'm like locked in on that, it is such a fun song to sing. But I think that's what's interesting too. You bring up the Beach Boys, and I feel like I'm equally influenced by musicals, Disney soundtracks, like anything else. And I think even that melody, to me, singing it now, I'm just like, it is like a little Disney.
Oh yeah. It is.
Like,
it's
and
it's
I
fun.
love that. And like that's what made sense. But like it's I'm always kind of mystified, I think, how songs manifest. Like where does this?
Yeah, totally.
Because I think to those who are not songwriters, like it's very rare. I think I've yet to meet someone who has like deliberately composed melody. I don't know, I just feel like it's one of those things. I feel like I've always regarded it's like a breeze, like you're outside and a breeze blows, and that's melody. I mean, I also think too that with me, melody, it's like also informed by, for me, conversational tone and cadence and the way people talk. And I think I've always tried to make or write my songs in like, it's like a conversation. I think I'm always kind of having a conversation, whether it's with myself or somebody else or whatever. But like, I think about that stuff a lot. I think it's so interesting, like how we as human beings talk to each other, and as we communicate, like my pitch just went up as I said communicate. Like, our talking is full of that. I think it's very easy to just like disregard it. It's just how we talk. But it's God, that's so interesting. And even too, like, not that I speak Mandarin Chinese by any stretch of the imagination. I absolutely do not. But I happen to know that, like, with Mandarin, like the way you speak that language is actually very indicative of like tone and pitch. And you can
I've heard that too.
And that's the way the language works. It's not even like we are speaking English right now and we are using different tones and pitch, and we are saying words that mean the same thing, and we know that those words mean the same thing no matter how we say them in terms of cadence or pitch or tone. But in Mandarin, that's like part of the bag, and that's what makes it such a challenging language, because you also have to make sure that you're speaking the correct way.
I guess we have that just with the question, because I've never thought about that before. I've heard it before, but I never thought that we have that one.
Yes.
Where it's like, you have to do that. But that's just one you have to worry about.
And then of course you get, I'm sure you heard this too, like, an English teacher telling, maybe not you personally, but like someone like, well, you don't ask it like a question unless if it's a question.
No,
you know what I mean? And like there's
yeah.
that as well. Of course.
Yeah. So using like Capture the Flag as an example, right? Like how do you? So you're gonna like write it that night, right? Like you're sitting, you write the song,
right.
You have your melody and everything.
Right.
and it's different now because you go to Diane, right?
Right.
Like
or,
to work on these songs. But at what point do you feel like you're comfortable enough to record it? Like, how much practice goes into that and thought goes into your vocal delivery?
Yeah, I think when the words are like solidified to me is like, that's probably like step one. Because I think sometimes like, you write something and you're like, that word still doesn't like feel right. And then you kind of think about it and it's like, do I need to change it? Does it just feel weird because I'm doing something, So I think once the words are locked in, I'm pretty much like, okay, I feel like this is good. And of course, and that also informs like the format of the song, like is the spaces between the verse and the chorus feel comfortable, and am I playing it and am I having fun? And have I played it many times over the course of many days and weeks, it unchanging, having fun, whatever. I also too, haven't gotten out in a while. I'm playing shows now. It's a little different. But when I wasn't playing shows, I was going to Silverstream Studios open mic. Shout out Silverstream Studio in Montclair. Have an open mic. I think it's every second Thursday of the month. But they started doing those, and I started going. And that was a really good way, too. So if I had a song and I hadn't really played it out for anybody, I would go to the open mic, and I would be like, let's see what the reaction is, folks digging this. Am I not getting maybe as big as a reaction as I wanted? That's like a great way, I think, for me to gauge as well. Like, okay. And there's like a couple songs like Spent the Summer Alone, which is another song I have on Spotify. Yeah. I brought that to an open mic and I was getting a lot of good feedback on that. And to the point where I was like, oh, okay, like this is done. Like, and thank you to everybody who ever gave me feedback on that. I think those spaces are so good to just kind of like assess where you're at, and also to see like what doesn't work. Maybe this key is not working. Maybe I need to bump it up. Maybe when I went to go sing it in front of people, it felt too low, or whatever. Or like maybe I was playing the space between the chorus and the bridge, and it felt like it went on forever. Because you experience things differently in front of an audience than you do at home. So
you can see, I've done this a lot too. I always test my songs, and you're like, you get the feedback without people even giving it to you for those things. You're just watching people's eyes.
You can tell with engagement or lack of engagement, and sometimes like, look, like that's not also to say that like, if it didn't hit the way you wanted it to, that it's a bad song or whatever. It could just mean that like, we'll rethink a couple of things. Maybe that wasn't the right crowd to hear it,
And it's your artist, as an artist, it's your obligation. There's sometimes where I'm like, this song didn't hit, but fuck them.
100%.
Like this is a good song.
If you believe in it. So I think for me, it's like, I want to make sure that like the format, the structure, I should say, the structure and the words are solidified, that I have been performing it at home as is, and it feels good. Mm-hmm. And then it's kind of like, if I want to take that extra step, I'll go and I'll play it at an open mic, or maybe even play it at a show. Like I played a show last week, and I played 2 new songs I hadn't played for anybody yet because I was there. Yeah. And that was also informative, for me.
So and any kind of field test, right?
Right. And then I probably once that's good, I'll start demoing it at home. And just kind of like fleshing things out, because I feel like while I do pride myself in my songwriter abilities, there are other things, part of the, I think creative processes we're adding onto the song. Like I think I kind of mentioned earlier, like sometimes like I'm not a lead person. It's very difficult for me to come up with that. I can come up with like little melodies and little things to sing in between, but sometimes lead guitar is not my forte. Sometimes I can get it. And sometimes I can translate it, but sometimes like I just know there's like way more talented folks out there for that kind of tasks. Yeah. But still, like I kind of toy and I tinker with it. And then ideally I'll have like some sort of demo where like maybe there's drums and things involved. And then at that point I feel good and prepared to go into a studio environment and collaborate with somebody on it, because I know that I've done my homework. I know I have my markers in Logic, intro, verse, chorus, bridge. And I know that I can now present this to another person, and we can have a conversation about it that is guided. And also, too, another thing I actually started doing, I started doing this when I went in to record with Ace for the Northbound EP. I started doing chord sheets, and I'm like, all right, well, if I need somebody to play, I'm gonna lay out how many measures everything is, what chords, lyrics,
Sure.
BPM. Like I basically have like a one sheet for the song in the event that I need to show somebody what I'm talking about. And thankfully, I don't think we've ever really had to do that yet in my collaboration experiences, but they're always on hand just in case, because I think too, as like a songwriter and as somebody too who it's like the way I experience chords is like by shapes, and I have musical knowledge and training, basic theory and what have you, and I can have those kinds of conversations, but like depending on how deep we get, I might hit a point, and it might just be easier for me to like refer to the sheet.
Sure, of course.
But that's kind of like my step-by-step process in terms of like what it takes for me to go into the studio and like record a song. And I find that while very intensive, and perhaps there's some artists out there who are like, that sounds like hell. I mean, like, yeah, I mean, like, it can get annoying to feel like you got to hit all these steps. But I'll tell you, when I'm in the studio, I want to do it right. I want to have fun. And I don't want to think about, is this unfinished? Do I like that lyric? What if the audience doesn't like? You know what I mean? Because it's like at that point, I've already done the work.
Yeah, no, totally.
But it is a lot of lead up.
Yeah.
Because you know what it is?
Yeah.
DIY artist, man, it's like there's no label giving me the $1 million advance. You know what I mean? Like, I ain't Whitney Houston, and it is not 1993. Like, the world doesn't even work like that anymore. Even if I was on a label and if I did get a small advance, it would be a very small advance. But it's like I value the people that I work with and collaborate with. I want always to appropriately compensate them for their time and their talents. Always. That's of utmost importance to me. But I also, as a person with a limited bank account, it's like I also know that like I want to do everything I can to save time and money for all parties involved. I don't want to have whoever I'm recording with, producer, mixing engineer, whatever, I don't want them to have to sit there while I try to pluck and figure out a lead that I could have done on my own time had I prepared. And I get it too. Look, it's like you can't always, hop into a session like
when you're in the studio.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
And sometimes too, I'm very okay handing it off to somebody else and being like, if this is making sense to you, by all means. If you're okay with, I don't mind you playing on the track. I always want to best serve the song. But I really think about it as responsibly as I can, because at the end of the day, it's my dime and our time. And I think too, it's like I like to run a pretty professional ship, because it's like, we all have lives and all of our time is worth something. I don't want to waste your time, just as I don't want you to waste mine. So, that's like kind of like my step-by-step process. And I do try to adhere to that, because I think I was demoing the stuff for the Northbound EP because I needed to. Like, there was some stuff that was like unfinished. I'm like, I got to figure this out. And I also didn't know how the sessions were going to go. Did I know how valuable, bouncing the stems ahead of time was going to be in terms of saving us time and money? No, I didn't. But man, once that happened, Ace was like, we easily just saved like 2 days.
Nice.
Because I didn't have to play scratch tracks. They were already there.
Yeah.
So
So I've done all of my albums previously. Like, none of mine even have a name, because the project was supposed to be just me writing songs and then me choosing the best ones after a while and like put together a band or something, and it just never turned into that. Kids, COVID happened, podcast happened, but now I do have an album. I talk about it all the time on these episodes, but fuck it, it's my podcast. I'll talk about it.
Yeah.
But I do have this mysterious album that I like. It's done, it's written, the words have been subbed out. I've had it for like 2 years now, right? And I just haven't had time to record it.
Right.
But I started to work on the songs. I'm like, I wanted to go to a studio. Don't have time, but I do have time to chip away at it at home.
Yeah.
And one song now is like old done. Like, if it was, my series is called the Safety Tapes, right? So if it's like Safety Tapes Volume 6, which was my last one, it would be done. It would be on that.
Yeah.
But now, 4 years later or whatever, I actually think, and it's funny that you're saying this, just in the past month or two, I've been thinking, like, as this song has come to a close, I'm like, this is actually a normal person's demo. Like, I could take this.
Right.
If I go to the studio with all these stems and someone's
Right.
like, wow, the solo's done, the rhythm guitar is
Right.
done, all this shit is done, fine.
Right.
Then they can help me mix it and, like, tell me that at least they're giving me another ear, which I've never done before.
100%. And I think those, anytime, I think I was always scared to collaborate with others in a studio environment because of the price tag. You know, I was always afraid to do that because of the financial factor.
Yeah.
But then I was like, there was so much learning happening that I even thought, you know, this, whatever money I'm spending on this, I'm learning so much. And that's
Sure.
also not
Yeah.
to say that, like, you don't have to necessarily re-record everything. Like, I think there were little things, like little, like, synth leads and maybe, like, little guitar licks. Like, there were some demo stuff that did end up staying on, like, the Northbound stuff. Little things. But they gave the song character, and I think both Ace and I were like, you know, this still sounds really good. And there's also, like, no reason for us to, like, re-record this, because it's like this, like, little thing that just, like, adds character to the song. So I think also sometimes you can go into a studio environment and you could be like, you know what, yeah, like, this is great, we don't have to re-record this. And then sometimes you'll be like, well, you know, like, let's, like, play with tone and, like, you know, like, see what that's like.
No, that's exactly it. Yeah. Or like
Yeah.
you said, you know, exactly what you said before about the drums is what made me think of it. Because
Yeah.
I'm like, I just have like some like Logic drummer thing, and I
Yeah.
played drums for like, that was my first instrument, right? So I
Right,
can
okay.
sit with Logic drummer and make it sound
Sure.
good.
Yeah.
But it's not real drums. Like, if I
Right.
can go into the studio and just play the frickin' drums, it'll
Yeah.
be completely different. Or,
Absolutely.
better yet, what I'm starting to think of, and after having this conversation with you, it's pretty obvious to me, as the songwriter, I don't think I'm capable of playing drums to a song that I wrote, because it's like I
yeah.
can't play every instrument.
Right.
It won't serve the song,
Right,
Because I
right.
can't hear every part.
It's tough, and drums have never been my strong suit, and I think I always wanted to learn. It was a drum set was a frequent request on the Roe Teenage Christmas list that never happened. We also just did not have space for it in our house. I don't know what my parents would have done.
No, I didn't either, but I was a drummer, so we figured it out. But it was like,
But I hear you. Even I before I was like going into the studio, I mean, like, my Bandcamp, you know, roknowsbest.bandcamp.com or bandcamp.roknowsbest, whatever it is. Actually, let's get that situation. It's roknowsbest.bandcamp.com. If you go on my Bandcamp, you know, I have like basically like, I think everything I've ever recorded up there. It's a lot if you go through. And I started doing home recordings, I think in 2011 or 2012. And I remember I was playing. Oh, I remember what this is for. After I graduated college, I again, self-assigned homework. I was like, I'm going to give myself a songwriting project to do. And I called it the 24/7 like songwriting project. And it was inspired by, there's an artist named Into It Over It, Evan Weiss. He has an album called 52 Weeks where he wrote and recorded a song a week for a year. And the album became 52 Weeks. And I was inspired by that. And I was also inspired by, this is going to sound kind of bizarre, but any music nerds out there, I took a avant-garde music class and learned about Arnold Schoenberg. And Arnold Schoenberg composed pieces. And some of the pieces that he composed used like all, I guess, like 12 tones in the scale, or like every single note. And the way the piece worked was like, you could not repeat a note until all the other notes had been already played. It's
cool.
very atonal. Like it does not sound pleasing to the ear, but I think that's like not the point of it. Arnold Schoenberg stands, please don't come for me. We can have a discourse and dialogue, because it's been a very long time since I've talked about him.
Yeah.
But anyway, I thought that was interesting how he was like composing pieces, and like that was his rule. His rule in this like avant-garde, you know, art was like, I'm going to compose these pieces, but I'm not going to repeat a note until we have already gone through all the other notes. Bizarre. But I thought about that. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to basically do this 24/7 project. And I'm like, I'm going to write, I think it was kind of like every week. I think it was like doing it every week. And it was like, I'm going to pick an hour of the day. And at that hour of the day, I'm going to write a song about what's going on at that moment. And I'm going to write that, and then use that week to record it and then like release it. And I'm not going to repeat a day of the week until all the other days of the week have been done. I think that was like my thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, I bring this up. This was something I did, and I did it. Like I represented all the hours of the day, and they're in order, you know, on this self-recorded, self-mixed album.
Yeah.
But I remember I was playing my mom one of the songs. This was like 10 years ago, I think, and that I had written. And I was, you know, I was like listening to mixes and of myself, which is also like equally maddening and very frustrating. Which is why I really don't really home record to that extent anymore. But she was listening back to it, and she was just like, "You sound so tired." And I was like, "Well, I am. I'm like, I'm doing everything." You know, it's like writing the song, I'm playing the instrument, I'm mixing it, I'm releasing. And I think it takes out part of you to do everything.
No, it does.
And that's why I am mystified by and inspired by the legends that are Elliott Smith and others. And even Paul McCartney too, you know, Paul McCartney 2, T-O-O, but also McCartney 2, the album. That was something he did at home. It was like home recording. I mean, he did all of that, you know. Maybe he had like a little engineering help or something, but like he did all that like by himself. And like granted, he had like money and connections and like blah blah blah. But like, you know, it's so difficult. I mean, you know what, you can even arguably say, like, let's say Elliott Smith, you know, yes, played all the instruments, but Elliott Smith was not mixing it too.
No, and he probably had somebody that was telling him when it sounded good or not.
Yeah,
that's the reason I can't do it anymore.
Right.
That's what's made me realize it's like I can write the song, but at a certain point, unless you're just doing like, unless you're going for a lo-fi like Daniel Johnston type vibe, which I have done before. Right. But when you want to transcend, when you're headed toward the Beatles, you need somebody to listen to you.
Yeah, no, for sure. But it's just it is a lot. It takes a lot of energy, and it's very difficult, I've learned, to objectively hear yourself, and not only just like hear yourself and your performances, but also to like process your ideas. I mean, it becomes so insular that it's impossible to work without losing your mind.
No, like I literally have, with this song, I have two versions of two different types of vocal performances, and I'm like, I don't know which one is better. Yeah. That's like that. I had that like a month ago, and I'm like, and I'm fine with that, right? Like I didn't go too crazy with it, right? Like I'm like, this is how I know. Yeah. You know, like I knew I'd need to go at some point, and I've hit that threshold now. You know? Sure. Before that, I didn't give a shit. Right. I just like, it didn't take me that long. Right. It took me a month to record the whole album of my 6th version, and then like the song I did for Harrison's compilation took me a month to do the one song. Right. And that's where I kind of was like, this is not scalable anymore. Because I would the way I tricked myself before is I would record like I'd work on, kind of like you were saying with the switching the hours, I wouldn't record or approach a song on the album before I worked on the next, all of them. So by the time I went back to the first one again, it would be like new. Yeah. You know?
Yeah. Right. To give your like ears and mind like a break. Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, we've been talking for a while now. It's time. Ro, this has been great. This has been a beautiful conversation.
Yes, Rich,
we only talked about one song. We'll have to do more later, but I feel like the depth that we've been able to traverse through in context of that one song was phenomenal.
Absolutely. And we did talk about Line Drive a little bit too.
We did, but we'll have to talk about that again.
For sure.
Could do next time. We'll try to do all of Northbound.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be awesome.
That would be fun.
That'd be awesome.
You want to give a last plug for folks where they should find you?
Yes.
Like the home base.
Yes. So, I guess RoeKnows.com is my website where I kind of like post announcements and things of that nature. You can find a lot there. In that website, there's like, you know, links to everything else. I do have a link tree. I think it's like linktree.com/RoeKnowsBest. You can find me on Instagram, you know, Facebook. I'm on all the socials. I have a YouTube channel, you know, search Roe Knows Best there. I'm around. I'm unfortunately and fortunately severely online, as they say. But yes, you know, come say hello and we can chat there.
Perfect. Yeah, and I'll put those links in the show notes so people
Awesome.
can check those out. And yeah, it's been real.
Awesome.
Talk
Thanks
to
so much, Rich.
everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Yeah, and thanks
Yes.
for coming on, Ro.
Thanks so much.